Leprosy sure doesn't sound like fun. But let's continue on. See if we get to something a little bit more exciting. Leviticus 15:1. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 15:2, say to the Israelites, when any man has a running discharge from his body, because of his discharge he is unclean. So this is certainly an interesting verse in the Bible. What is going on here? This running discharge. Some of the other translations refer to it as a running issue. And when I first read this section, I thought it would have been some sort of diarrhea or something where the person's having a little bit of leakage and it's kind of contaminating things and they need to be cleaned up. But a lot of the commentaries I looked at suggested it's more of a sexual thing. And the fact that it states that when a man rather than a person, it really suggests that it is a male-only situation here that is causing this discharge. And this discharge is likely from the genitals and could be a sexual disease like gonorrhea or some other form of infection that causes some sort of discharge, be that mucus or something else. Leviticus 15:3. This shall be the law concerning his uncleanness in his discharge, whether his body runs with discharge or has stopped running, it is uncleanness in him. This description of running or not running, not functioning in the correct way that it's supposed to, really does make it sound like a sexually transmitted disease, and a very unfortunate position to be in. This really does sound very unpleasant, and I guess this is just the icing on the cake that not only is this person going through this really rough time, but now they're considered unclean and can't participate in the activities of the congregation. Leviticus 15:4. Every bed on which the one who has the discharge lies is unclean, and everything on which he sits shall be unclean. 15:5. Whoever touches that person's bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. 15:6. And whoever sits on anything on which he who has the discharge has sat shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. 15:7. And he who touches the flesh of him who has the discharge shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. 15:8. And if he who has the discharge spits on him who is clean, then he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. So this person here, they do not seem to be in the greatest of health, and their situation is one that risks contaminating others, where they sleep, where they sit. If they spit on someone, there is a contamination that the person that interacts with them by these means becomes contaminated and unclean themselves, yet only to the evening, provided that they clean and wash up or wash the thing that is contaminated. So there's something going on there. Maybe we'll see a little bit more, but it really makes me think of some sort of virus or some sort of bacterial thing. I still, I'm kind of leaning towards the diarrhea. This could be some sort of like E. coli or some sort of food thing that is causing a ugly situation, an ugly discharge, as they say. But I could see it also working with the idea of a venereal disease or ailment. that the places where this person's genitalia reside are contaminated, and wherever they get exposed to or near become potentially contaminated as well. So we have the orders to kind of clean and wash, and that if you get exposed to this, wash your hands, get cleaned up, go have a bath, whatever, what have you. So there's something going on there. Leviticus 15 and 9. And any saddle on which he who has the discharge rides shall be unclean. 15 and 10. Whoever touches anything that has been under him shall be unclean until the evening, and he who carries those things shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. 15:11. Whomever he who has the discharge touches without rinsing his hands in water shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. When we first started looking at this discharge, it was very specific in the things that would be made unclean, and now it has been expanded, so it's much more broad, and that's probably a good thing, for that would help catch any of the edge cases to prevent people from finding loopholes in the law. Because that's what people do. They look at the law, they analyze it, and they try to find ways around things, even to this day. Now, is what we're looking at here, is this a ceremonial thing that because a person has this condition or whatever, that they're ceremonially unclean and can't participate? And is that it? Or is there some sort of health and safety aspect to this as well? That there is some sort of contamination, some sort of sickness that could potentially spread? And I think it's probably both, that God didn't just make laws for the fun of making laws, that they usually have benefits outside of what they're written as. Things that the Hebrew people would not know about at the time, that throughout history and technology we would be able to find reasons for what the purpose of some of these laws and rules are. And of course, if you got somebody discharging stuff all over the place and that's just a nasty situation, you probably do want to wash your hands. Just saying. That seems like a good idea to me. So I can't fault the law for that, but I don't know. In some instances, maybe it's not a big deal, but the law needs to be written for the edge cases to catch those situations that could be potentially harmful to the Hebrew people and the Israelites. So it is what it is. Leviticus 15 and 12. The earthen vessel that he with the discharge touches shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. So we have this earthen vessel here described, that if it gets exposed to this person, that it needs to be destroyed. Now, when it comes to bacteria and sickness and whatnot, earthen vessels, they're very porous and they can absorb a lot of stuff and they can hold on to them. So that can be very problematic. So the destruction of the object would prevent it from being used, and I could see why that would be like that. But we have the wood objects here that they can just be washed and then they're fine. Now, wood has some antimicrobial properties. That's what makes wood cutting boards so good. So maybe there's some sort of aspect to that as far as these wooden vessels go, that they don't trap in the bacteria in the same way that the earthen vessels do. So that's kind of cool. Leviticus 15:13. When he who has a discharge is cleansed of it, he shall count 7 days for his purification, then wash his clothes and bathe in running water and be clean. 15:14. On the 8th day he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and come before the Lord to the door of the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. 15:15. And the priest shall offer them, one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and he shall make atonement for the man before the Lord for his discharge. So here we have a man who has been delivered from the affliction of the discharge, whatever that means in detail. And he has to be clean 7 days, where it doesn't come back, and I think there's some sort of assurance that way. So he's been clean for 7 days. He has to wash, get cleaned up, and then make an offering to the Lord to be clean, to be right with God. And when he's clean, he'll be able to participate again in the different services of the tabernacle and making the offerings and being able to interact with other people. For being unclean is very isolating. Leviticus 15:16. If any man has a discharge of semen, he shall wash all his body in water and be unclean until evening. 15:17. And every garment and every skin on which the sperm comes shall be washed with water and be unclean until evening. The fluids of reproduction are almost inherently dirty and cause uncleanness, and it makes sense that whatever they get on becomes unclean. I really don't know what else to say. Leviticus 15:18. The woman also with whom a man with emission of semen shall lie, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean until evening. So the sex act makes both parties unclean, and they're required to bathe afterwards. And also the uncleanness lasts until the evening, so the new day. Leviticus 15:19. And if a woman has discharge, her regular discharge of blood of her body, she shall be in her impurity or separation for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. 15:20. And everything that she lies on in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sits on shall be unclean. 15:21. And whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. 15:22. Whoever touches anything she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. 15:23. And if her flow has stained her bed or anything on which she sat, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. So here we have the menstruation process. And during that time of that occurrence, there's blood, and it makes things unclean. And we have several cases here of situations that would cause someone to be unclean. Leviticus 15:24. And if any man lie with her, and her impurity be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days. And every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. This generally is something that happens unintentionally, and in fact, in a later chapter, we see that this act here is forbidden, engaging in intercourse during the menstruation. Leviticus 15:25. And if a woman has an issue of blood for many days, not during the time of her separation, or if she has a discharge beyond the time of her regular impurity, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness, she shall be as in the days of her impurity. She shall be unclean. 15:26. Every bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge shall be as the bed of her impurity, and whatever she sits on shall be unclean. as in her impurity. 15:27. And whoever touches those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until evening. 15:28. But if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall wait 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. 15:29. And on the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring them to the priest at the door of the tent of meeting. 15:30. He shall offer one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, and he shall make atonement for her before the Lord for her unclean discharge. What we have described here is something truly unpleasant. We have a woman that has experienced her menstruation in a continuous sense, one that continues to bleed and not cease bleeding, or maybe only temporarily, but not following the cycle that is normal. So it's an abnormal bleeding situation. And as a result, she'll be considered unclean. And because she's unclean, she's not able to participate in a lot of activities, participate in the feasts, participate in worship in the tabernacle or the temple later on. Unable to perform any of these offerings and things, and just generally shunned from society. When she interacts with other people, she could make them unclean, so it would lead to other people avoiding her, to avoid becoming unclean. So it would be a very painful situation. In the New Testament, in I think 3 of the Gospels, there's a story of a woman that's going through this situation, and she ends up getting healed by Jesus. And it's a very wonderful situation where she is able to return back to society. She's able to give these offerings and reconnect. And it's pretty cool. And I can't wait till we get there, but it might be a couple of years. So I'll have to hold on till then. Leviticus 15:31. Thus you shall separate the Israelites from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in the midst of them. 15:32. This is the law for him who has a discharge, and for him who has emissions of sperm, being made unclean by it. 15:33. And for her who is sick with her impurity, and for any person who has a discharge, whether man or woman, and for him who lies with her who is unclean. So throughout the book of Leviticus, we've seen a lot of stuff relating to the concept of clean and unclean. What is that all about? Well, it all relates to God and his holiness. God is an incredibly holy being, and his holiness is so holy that it is destructive to those that are not holy. It would just wipe people right off of the map if they came in contact with his physical presence. And God wants to work with these people. He wants to work with the Israelites. He wants to be their God and for them to be his people. So as a result, he gave Moses instructions to build this tabernacle, which is a portable tent that God would be able to dwell in, and he would be able to interact with the people from in there. The people are not holy beings and have a lot of sin. As a result, inside the courtyard of the tabernacle, there is an altar that is used for sin offerings, taking animals and transferring the sin from the people into the animals so that the animals can take the place of the people, and to purify the people so that they're able to be closer to God. Even after these sacrifices, they're still not able to really come in God's presence, but they're able to at least be within inside the courtyard of the tabernacle. We see the priests, who are several individuals, a smaller group of people, who are at a different level and are able to enter into the tent itself. But in the back of the temple, the Holy of Holies,
the high priest is the only one allowed to enter, and that's only after a lot of preparation, and he's only able to go in there 1 day a year. And they tie a chain to him, or a rope, and bells, so that if the bells stop ringing, they know he dropped dead, and they can pull him out by the rope, because God's holiness is so powerful that it is destructive. So when we have individuals that are unclean entering into the tabernacle, it is potentially dangerous and destructive. It's for their own safety that the unclean are not allowed within the tabernacle. We saw with Aaron and Aaron's sons that were doing silly things, whether they were drinking on the job or not following the rules that God outlined for them, and they were struck dead inside the courtyard. So it's something very serious. These offerings need to be made to keep people clean and keep people holy so that they're able to be within the presence of God. In the New Testament, we've had a really good sacrifice, a better sacrifice than any of these animals. We had the sacrifice of God's firstborn son, Jesus. And when he died as a sacrifice, he paid the price so that the rest of us, if we choose to accept it, can be made holy and can be within the presence of God and have a relationship with God. And that's pretty cool.